Sorry, I'm in a wheelchair. The words fell softly into the bright afternoon air, but to everyone standing nearby, they sounded like a door closing. The park was alive with sunlight that day. Children chased kites across the open field, dogs barked joyfully, and the scent of roasted corn drifted from a nearby cart. It was the kind of golden, hopeful afternoon where anything felt possible. Yet in the middle of all that warmth stood Arif Malik, a single father with tired eyes and a hopeful heart, staring at the woman in front of him as if the world had suddenly paused. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest acts can change everything. Arif hadn't planned on falling in love again. Not after the hospital corridors, the sleepless nights, and the quiet funeral that had left him alone with a 5-year-old daughter and a silence that felt heavier than grief itself. His wife had passed away 3 years ago, and since then, his world had revolved around one thing, his daughter, Meher. Every morning he braided her hair with clumsy fingers, every afternoon he waited outside her school gate under the burning sun, and every night he told her stories about brave princesses who always found their light again. But no story had prepared him for loneliness. He met Sana Qureshi on an ordinary weekday afternoon. Meher had insisted on stopping at the small bookshop near the park. Sana worked there, surrounded by shelves of worn novels and poetry collections. She had kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Arif noticed how she knelt to Meher's level to recommend a story about a girl who planted stars in her backyard. He noticed the patience in her voice, the gentleness in the way she handled books, and the quiet strength in her posture. He didn't notice the wheelchair at first. It wasn't until a week later, when he returned to ask her out for coffee, that he saw it. She moved from behind the counter with practiced ease, her hands guiding the wheels smoothly across the wooden floor. There was no hesitation in her movement, but there was caution in her eyes. "Sorry, I'm in a wheelchair," she said, not with shame, but with a protective instinct, as though she had learned to prepare for disappointment before it arrived. Arif felt something twist in his chest. Not because of the chair. Not because of what it meant. But because he saw in her eyes the expectation of rejection. As if she had rehearsed this moment before. As if she had watched hope fade from someone's face too many times. He remembered the way people looked at him after his wife died. With pity. With distance. As though grief was contagious. He remembered how neighbors stopped inviting him to gatherings, unsure of what to say. He remembered how hard it was to feel normal again. And suddenly, he saw that same isolation wrapped around Sana like an invisible wall. Sana had been in a car accident 5 years earlier. A drunk driver had shattered more than just metal and glass. It had taken her ability to walk and, for a long time, her belief that she could still live fully. She told him this later, under the shade of a neem tree in the park, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly as they rested on her lap. She had lost friends who didn't know how to include her anymore. She had ended an engagement because her fiancé's family didn't want complications. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece, finding purpose in books and quiet afternoons. Arif listened, not as a man evaluating a future, but as someone recognizing a shared language of loss. The challenges came quickly after they started seeing each other. The world was not built for wheels. Restaurants had steps without ramps. Sidewalks were broken and uneven. People stared openly, sometimes whispering. Some even praised Arif as if he were doing charity by being with her. The words stung more than insults. At school events, other parents looked confused. Meher, innocent and curious, asked why people stared at Sana's chair. Sana knelt beside her and explained that everyone moves differently, and that was okay. Meher accepted it instantly, because children often understand what adults complicate. But Arif struggled. Not with Sana, but with his own fear. He worried about emergencies. About how he would carry her up the stairs during a power outage. About how society would treat them. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love was enough to carry the weight of practicality. One afternoon, everything changed. Meher had insisted on entering the annual kite festival competition in the park. She had made her own kite, decorated with glitter and crooked hearts. As the crowd gathered under the blazing sun, a sudden gust of wind snapped the string from her hands. The kite soared wildly before landing near a shallow slope by the lake. Meher ran after it without thinking. The ground near the lake was uneven, dusty, and slanted. Arif froze for a split second, calculating the distance. But before he could move, he saw Sana already in motion. Her hands pushed hard against the wheels, her arms straining as she navigated the rough terrain. The chair bumped and jolted, but she didn't stop. She reached Meher just as the little girl stumbled near the water's edge. With swift instinct, Sana grabbed her, steadying her small body against her own. The crowd gasped, then fell silent. Arif reached them seconds later, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear himself breathe. Sana's arms were shaking from the effort, her palms reddened from gripping the wheels so tightly. But she smiled at Meher, brushing dust from her cheeks. In that moment, Arif saw something clearer than he ever had before. Strength was not measured by legs that walked. It was measured by courage that moved forward despite fear. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of amber, Arif made his decision. He didn't see a wheelchair. He saw resilience. He didn't see limitation. He saw a woman who had rebuilt herself from ruin and still had the heart to love his daughter like her own. His next move wasn't dramatic. There was no grand speech in front of a crowd. Instead, he began making changes quietly. He modified the entrance of his small home, installing a ramp with his own hands. He rearranged furniture to create space. He researched accessibility laws and started advocating for ramps in local shops. He stopped worrying about what people would think and started focusing on what truly mattered. Weeks later, on another bright afternoon in the same park where it all began, Arif asked Sana to build a life with him. Not because he wanted to rescue her. Not because he felt sorry. But because he recognized an equal. Meher clapped her hands in excitement, shouting that she always wanted a mom who read the best stories. Sana cried openly, not from sadness, but from the shock of being chosen without hesitation. Their life was not perfect. There were still obstacles, still stairs, still days when exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them. But there was also laughter echoing through sunlit rooms, bedtime stories told in tandem, and a small family that refused to let society define their limits. Love, Arif realized, is not about walking side by side in the traditional sense. It is about moving forward together, however that movement looks. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps spread stories of hope and reminds others that kindness still exists. And before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word courage if you believe that love is stronger than judgment. Because sometimes, the most powerful next move isn't walking away. It's choosing to stay.